Hello friends. Welcome to Luxury Stories, the ultimate destination for lovers of high-end experiences, opulent lifestyles, and untold tales of extravagance. Your support means the world to us. Please do well to hit that subscription button and turn on the notification bell to get notified on our subsequent stories. Don't forget to like and share with friends. Now, relax and enjoy the story. Grace sat on the edge of the large sofa in the living room, staring at a stack of receipts in her hands. She was a tall, graceful woman in her early 30s, with soft brown eyes that reflected both kindness and quiet determination. The house she lived in with her husband, Kevin, was spacious, furnished with comfortable couches, shiny marble floors, and framed photographs of their wedding day. Kevin, on the other hand, was in the study, pacing around while on the phone with his mother, Mrs. Alice. Kevin, on the phone. "Yes, Ma. Everything is fine. Work has been great. I have more than enough to take care of Grace. You know I always do my best." Grace overheard these words as she walked closer to the study door. She rolled her eyes, exasperated. Kevin was boasting again as if he were the breadwinner. For a moment, her thoughts drifted back to how this whole arrangement began. In the early days of their marriage, Kevin had a promising job, but soon after, he lost it. He tried several other positions, but each time he would quit, saying his bosses didn't respect him or the workload was too much. Eventually, he stopped looking for stable work altogether. Being an industrious woman, Grace took on extra work. She ran a small export business that supplied local crafts and goods to buyers overseas. She had labored tirelessly to grow that business from scratch, hiring a few staff members to help with packaging and logistics. Over time, she earned enough to maintain the household comfortably. However, Kevin's ego bruised easily if anyone mentioned that he was not working. Out of love, Grace never corrected him in front of others when he claimed he was the provider. Grace, whispering to herself, "It's not like I need him to shout it from the rooftops that I'm the one who pays. But this is getting out of hand. He's so comfortable lying." She turned away from the study door and walked back to the living room. On the coffee table lay a pile of bills she had just paid: electricity, water, internet, staff salaries, everything. A pang of disappointment hit her. She realized Kevin was sending money every month to his mother, Mrs. Alice, but that money actually came from Grace. Yet Kevin never bothered to mention that small detail. Grace looked around the living room. It was neat and bright. On one wall hung a large television. On another was a bookshelf filled with novels she loved to read in her spare time, though that spare time was now quite limited. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Dr. Melanie, her closest friend, who also happened to be a well-respected physician. Dr. Melanie, on the phone. "Hey Grace, just checking in. Everything okay? You sound a bit stressed in your text messages." "Grace, I'm fine, just tired. You know how Kevin can be. And now his mother is coming to visit in a few days." Dr. Melanie. "Oh dear. I remember how she was at the wedding. She made that huge scene because the flower arrangements weren't to her liking." Grace, sighing. "Yes, that's her. I'm really not looking forward to her visit." Grace ended the call and walked into the kitchen, where one of her staff, Charity, was cleaning up. Charity was a cheerful woman in her early 20s, always ready with a smile. She noticed Grace's worried expression. "Charity, madam, are you okay? You look worried." "Grace, I'm fine, Charity. Just thinking about everything." Behind her calm tone lay a growing frustration. Grace decided that something had to change. For too long, Kevin had hidden behind her financial support while telling everyone, including his mother, that he was the successful one. Moreover, Mrs. Alice believed Grace was the lucky wife who benefited from Kevin's so-called hard work. Grace found herself wondering what would happen if life took a downward turn. Would Kevin be there for her, truly caring for her well-being, or would he vanish behind more excuses? She had already discussed an idea with Dr. Melanie about faking an illness to see how Kevin and Mrs. Alice would react. It was a dramatic move, but Grace felt pushed to the edge. She simply had to know the truth. In the study, Kevin was wrapping up his conversation with his mother. "Kevin." "Yes, Ma. I'll pick you up from the airport next Tuesday. Don't worry, I have everything covered." He hung up, walked to the living room, and looked at Grace. "Kevin." "Hey babe, my mom is arriving next week. She's really excited to see us. Let's make sure the guest room is set up nicely for her." "Grace, of course. Anything else?" She locked eyes with Kevin, searching for even a drop of genuine concern about how she was doing, but found nothing but self-assuredness in his voice. "Kevin, that's all. I'll be out with some friends tomorrow. Business meeting, you know. Bring in more deals for the house." Grace simply nodded, keeping her thoughts to herself. Once Kevin left the room, she took out her phone again and texted Dr. Melanie. "Grace, text, I want to go through with the plan. Help me pull this off." A crisp morning breeze swept through the airport arrivals area, where Kevin waited impatiently for his mother. He wore a flashy watch and well-pressed shirt, all courtesy of Grace's money, though he never mentioned that. Soon, Mrs. Alice appeared, holding a small handbag while another airport porter followed with a bigger suitcase. Mrs. Alice was a stout woman with sharp features, always wearing a stern expression that softened only when talking to her son. "Mrs. Alice, happily, my dear son. Oh, I've missed you so much." She stretched out her arms for a hug. Kevin smiled and embraced her. "Kevin, Ma, you look great. Let's get you home. Grace will be waiting to greet you." When they arrived at the house, Mrs. Alice stepped into the living room, taking in all the decor. She let her fingers glide across the plush couches, her eyes darting from the big television to the polished floor. She nodded in approval, turning to Kevin with a proud look. "Mrs. Alice, you really are my son. Look at all you've achieved." Grace, who had been in the kitchen, emerged with a warm smile. She reached out to hug Mrs. Alice, but the older woman merely extended her hand. Grace hid her surprise and simply gave a polite greeting. "Grace, welcome, Ma. I've prepared the guest room for you. Are you hungry? We have a meal waiting." Mrs. Alice, waving her hand dismissively, "I'm fine for now. I ate on the plane. I just need to rest." She then turned to Kevin again, ignoring Grace. "Mrs. Alice, so where's your study? I want to see the place where you do all your important work." Grace kept her composure, even though she felt a pang in her chest. She wanted to correct the misunderstanding. Kevin didn't do any real work in that study, but she bit her tongue. After all, she had a plan. Mrs. Alice's presence in the house immediately created tension. She frequently called out, "Grace, where's my tea?" Or "Grace, get me the remote." She treated Grace not like a daughter-in-law, but like a maid. Kevin acted as though this behavior was perfectly normal. Later that evening, as they all gathered for dinner, Mrs. Alice commented on how Kevin must be spending so much on groceries to keep such a well-stocked kitchen. Grace forced a small smile, aware that she was the one who actually purchased every item in the house. Kevin simply grinned, soaking up the praise. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Grace confronted Kevin gently. "Grace, you know, you haven't corrected your mother once today. She keeps assuming you pay for everything." "Kevin, why should I correct her? It makes her happy to believe I'm successful. Besides, our money is our money, right?" Grace, in a measured voice, "Yes, but it would be nice if I got some credit for my hard work. Or at least some appreciation for what I do." "Kevin, come on, Grace. Does it matter who gets the credit? Stop making a fuss." Grace realized this conversation would lead nowhere. She recalled her plan with Dr. Melanie and decided that the only way to make Kevin truly see her worth was to go through with it. With Mrs. Alice around, the timing was almost perfect. Grace needed to see how they would act if life suddenly took a difficult turn. Grace, closing her eyes, "Fine. Let's drop it." But she didn't drop it in her heart. Instead, she resolved to move forward with her scheme, even though it felt risky. The next morning, Grace woke up earlier than usual to finalize her plan. She slipped out of bed and stepped out onto the balcony, feeling the cool morning air on her skin. She took a deep breath, then dialed Dr. Melanie's number. "Dr. Melanie, good morning, Grace. Are we going ahead today?" "Grace, yes. I need to do this now. My mother-in-law is here, and I have a feeling this will be the best time to see who my husband really is when things get rough." "Dr. Melanie, all right. I'll come by the house in the afternoon. I'll say I came to check on you because you told me you were feeling unwell. Then I'll give your husband some alarming news." Grace, nervously, "Yes. Let's do it." After ending the call, Grace went downstairs to prepare breakfast. As she set the table, Mrs. Alice walked in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Mrs. Alice, you're up early. Well, it's good to see you doing something productive." Grace, inwardly sighing, "Good morning, Ma. I hope you slept well. Here's some breakfast for you." Just then, Kevin strolled in, taking a seat next to his mother. He casually mentioned that he had an important business meeting later in the day. Grace knew the truth. He would probably just meet friends at a lounge to chat idly. After breakfast, Grace pretended to look weak, occasionally clutching her stomach as if in pain. She made sure Mrs. Alice and Kevin noticed. Kevin, frowning. Grace, are you okay? What's wrong? Grace, I'm just feeling some aches, but it might be nothing serious. Mrs. Alice, rolling her eyes. She's fine. Probably just wants attention. Hiding her frustration, Grace slowly walked to the living room and laid down on the couch, closing her eyes. Around noon, Dr. Melanie arrived as planned, wearing her white coat and carrying a small bag of medical supplies. Kevin and Mrs. Alice were in the living room when she entered. Dr. Melanie. Hello, I'm Dr. Melanie. Grace mentioned she's been feeling really unwell, so I came by to check on her. Mrs. Alice. Humph, so dramatic. She was fine this morning. Ignoring the comment, Dr. Melanie walked over to Grace, who was reclining on the couch. She pulled out a stethoscope, gently checked Grace's vitals, then pressed her fingers along Grace's abdomen, asking routine questions about any pain or discomfort. Grace answered softly, feigning fatigue. Finally, Dr. Melanie turned to Kevin, an air of seriousness in her voice. Dr. Melanie, I'm concerned about some symptoms. I think Grace might be suffering from a condition that requires immediate tests. If not managed, it could be fatal within a few months. Please bring her to the hospital for a thorough checkup. Kevin, suddenly alert. Fatal? Like, how serious are we talking? Dr. Melanie, we need tests to be certain, but the signs point to a rare illness. If untreated, she could have about 3 months before it becomes very dangerous. Kevin stood there, mouth slightly open, not sure how to respond. Mrs. Alice looked at Grace with skeptical eyes. Mrs. Alice, are you sure this isn't just a bad case of indigestion? Or some trick? Dr. Melanie, I'm simply giving my professional opinion. It's best you don't wait. If it's something serious, you need to take immediate steps. Shortly afterward, Dr. Melanie left. Kevin and Mrs. Alice began whispering among themselves in the living room, out of Grace's hearing. Grace, pretending to be weak, thought, if they truly care, they'll show me some compassion. But a part of her suspected that their reactions would prove her deepest fears. The following day, Grace refused to go to the hospital, telling Kevin she was too weak to move. This was a part of her plan. She wanted Dr. Melanie to give them just enough alarming information to see how they might respond. Kevin spent most of the day hovering around her, but it was more out of curiosity than genuine concern. Kevin, nervously. Grace, maybe you should go to the hospital. You heard Dr. Melanie. This could be serious. Grace, pretending to whimper, I don't have the strength. Please, just let me rest today. Mrs. Alice, on the other hand, grew more impatient. She would stand by the couch and huff in annoyance, muttering about how Grace was overreacting. Mrs. Alice, people get stomachaches every day. You don't see them acting like they're on their deathbed. Such a weakling. Grace continued to play her part. She hardly ate, and when she did, she took a few bites and then set the plate aside, sighing deeply. Throughout the day, Kevin received phone calls from friends, which he took in another room. Grace knew he was likely telling them about her illness, but not out of genuine worry. Rather, it seemed like an inconvenience to him. In the late afternoon, Dr. Melanie stopped by again, claiming to have run some preliminary tests on Grace's blood sample, which Grace had given in secret for the ruse. Dr. Melanie, looking solemn. Kevin, Mrs. Alice, I have some concerning news. The test results confirm that Grace's condition could be terminal if left untreated. She needs consistent care and immediate attention. Kevin, eyes widening. How long does she have? Dr. Melanie, it's hard to say exactly, but if we assume the worst, 3 months. Kevin was at a loss for words. For a moment, Grace thought she saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Yet, once again, Mrs. Alice's only reaction was mild annoyance. Mrs. Alice, well, she's young, she'll probably get over it. Or she won't. These doctors always exaggerate. Meanwhile, Kevin, I hope you're not going to waste all your money on endless treatments. You have to be sensible. Grace's heart sank. She had hoped to see at least a flicker of care from Mrs. Alice, but instead, she heard only selfish remarks. She glanced at Kevin, wondering if he would defend her. Kevin, clearing his throat, Ma, calm down. Let's see what the best approach is. But, you're right. If it's truly terminal, maybe we just let things happen. At that moment, Grace felt a wave of disbelief. She realized Kevin was actually contemplating letting her suffer so as not to waste resources. Is this truly the man I married? She thought. Her eyes stung with unshed tears, but she forced herself to keep up the act. She closed her eyes and took shallow breaths, as though she were fighting pain. Dr. Melanie left soon after, her job done for the day. Grace maintained her facade of sickness, lying on the couch, occasionally moving to the bed. The household staff watched in silent horror as Mrs. Alice treated Grace like a lazy servant rather than a seriously ill family member. For them, it was almost unbelievable. They knew very well who really paid their salaries. Yet, they were powerless to intervene. On the third day of Grace's alleged illness, the atmosphere in the house took a severe turn. Mrs. Alice decided she had had enough of Grace's laziness. Early in the morning, Grace lay in bed, draped in a thin blanket, eyes closed as she pretended to be asleep. She heard the bedroom door open with a bang, then suddenly felt cold, soapy water splashing onto her face and body. Mrs. Alice, shouting, "Get up, you lazy woman! Is this what my son's hard-earned money is paying for? For you to lie around like a corpse?" Soaked and shivering, Grace sat up in shock. She locked eyes with Mrs. Alice, who stood there holding an empty bucket with a smug expression. Kevin appeared behind her mother in the doorway. He seemed startled at first, but then lowered his gaze. "Grace," weakly, "Kevin, are you just going to stand there?" Kevin shifted uncomfortably, but made no move to defend his wife. Mrs. Alice turned to him with a triumphant grin. "Mrs. Alice, see? She's just pretending. She can move perfectly fine when she wants to." Kevin simply nodded, arms folded over his chest. His eyes darted away from Grace's pleading look. In that moment, Grace's heart felt as if it had cracked into 1,000 pieces. She realized they were willing to torment her to get her out of the housework, possibly hoping her condition would worsen so they wouldn't have to bother caring for her much longer. After this humiliating act, Mrs. Alice demanded Grace go downstairs and prepare breakfast. "Mrs. Alice, if you have the energy to sit up and complain, you have the energy to cook." Weakly, Grace stood and dried herself off with a towel. She headed to the bathroom to change into dry clothes, then forced herself downstairs, making sure she walked slowly as if in pain. In the kitchen, she found Charity, the staff member, trying to prepare breakfast. Charity, worried, "Madam, let me do this. You need rest." Grace, voice trembling, "I'll be fine. Let's just do it together." Tears threatened to spill from Grace's eyes, but she blinked them back. She refused to let them see her cry. Instead, she went through the motions, cracking eggs, slicing vegetables, while feeling an overwhelming sense of betrayal. When breakfast was ready, Grace placed the food on the dining table. Mrs. Alice and Kevin sat down casually. Neither of them uttered a word of thanks. It was as if the morning's cruel incident hadn't happened. Grace excused herself, going back to the bedroom to rest, the soapy water still lingering in her mind as the most vivid proof of how little they valued her. Later that afternoon, Grace overheard a heated discussion between Mrs. Alice and Kevin in the living room. She tiptoed to the top of the stairs to listen. "Mrs. Alice, you need to sell off some of these properties soon, Kevin. Don't you see? If Grace truly has a few months left, we should get everything organized now, before she's gone." Kevin, in a hushed tone, "That's what I'm thinking, Ma. We can start with the smaller plots of land. I can find some buyers. We just need Grace to sign the paperwork. Once she's too weak, she'll be in no position to argue." Grace's breath caught in her throat. Anger boiled inside her. They were plotting to take her properties she had purchased with her own money, and sell them without her consent. The worst part was that they seemed to believe her life was worthless, that she would soon die, and that they could profit from her demise. That evening, Grace pulled out her phone to make 2 calls. The first was to Dr. Melanie, to inform her of the latest developments. The second was to Mr. Johnson, her lawyer, who was fully aware that Grace owned everything in her name. She explained the situation in detail, how Kevin and Mrs. Alice were planning to sell her property under the false assumption that she would soon die. "Mr. Johnson, firmly, Grace, you need to protect your assets immediately. I can prepare the documents that reaffirm your sole ownership, which can be shown to the police if they attempt any fraudulent sale." "Grace, thank you. Please come by the house tomorrow. Bring the authorities if necessary. I want to catch them in the act." "Mr. Johnson, I'll do exactly that. Just let me know the time. After hanging up, Grace sank onto the bed, running her fingers through her hair. She felt a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sorrow, betrayal, but also a renewed sense of resolve. She had to see this through. If Kevin and Mrs. Alice were truly capable of this cruelty, she needed to expose them before they did any more damage. That night, she lay awake, her mind spinning with thoughts. She remembered all the times she had lovingly paid the bills, made sure Kevin never lacked anything, even sent money to his mother each month. How could they do this to me? She wondered. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes, but she resolved not to let sorrow weaken her determination. She was going to end this charade on her own terms. Early the next morning, Grace woke to the sounds of hushed conversation in the living room. She pushed herself out of bed, still pretending to be ill, and quietly made her way downstairs. She found Kevin speaking with two men in business suits, while Mrs. Alice stood off to the side. Kevin, yes, the property is large, well located. You can see for yourselves. My wife is, well, she's not feeling well, but I can arrange for you to sign the paperwork soon. Buyer 1. We need to verify the papers. Are they all in your name? Kevin, hesitating, they are in my wife's name, but as her husband, I manage all her affairs. Mrs. Alice chimed in, offering a dismissive wave of her hand. Mrs. Alice, Grace is practically bedridden. Kevin handles everything now. The two potential buyers exchanged uncertain looks. Grace, hidden at the bottom of the staircase, shook her head in disbelief. She noticed that the staff stood in corners, eyes lowered, not daring to intervene, but clearly uncomfortable. Grace decided it was time to set the final stage for her big reveal. She sent a quick text message to Mr. Johnson and Dr. Melanie. They're trying to sell my property now. Please come with the police. Less than an hour later, Grace heard the distant sound of car doors slamming outside. She stayed upstairs, peeking out a window. She saw Mr. Johnson stepping out of a car with two police officers, followed by Dr. Melanie in her own vehicle. Meanwhile, Kevin and Mrs. Alice were busy showing the two businessmen around the ground floor, boasting about the family home. Kevin, pointing to a painting on the wall, we can include some of these fixtures in the sale if the price is right. Buyer 2. Interesting. We'll certainly consider that. A minute later, the front door opened. Mr. Johnson and the officers walked in calmly, followed by Dr. Melanie. The moment Kevin and Mrs. Alice noticed them, they froze. The two potential buyers looked confused. Mr. Johnson, clearing his throat, good morning. I'm Mr. Johnson, Grace's lawyer. I believe there has been an attempt to sell property without the true owner's consent. Police officer, we received information about possible fraudulent activity. Kevin's eyes darted around, searching for an explanation, but before he could speak, Grace appeared at the top of the stairs. She was fully dressed in a neat blazer, her hair styled, a look of cold determination on her face. She walked down the steps, each footstep echoing in the silence. Grace, voice steady, good morning, everyone. I hear you're interested in buying my property. The two buyers looked stunned. One of them even murmured, I thought she was dying. Mrs. Alice's face went pale, and Kevin stood there, mouth agape. Grace stepped into the center of the living room, facing Kevin, Mrs. Alice, and the two potential buyers. The police officers and Mr. Johnson stood beside her, forming a quiet but intimidating presence. Grace, I'm sure many of you are wondering how I'm up and walking around, given that I was supposed to be on my deathbed. She glanced at Dr. Melanie, who gave a small nod. Dr. Melanie. Kevin, Mrs. Alice, the diagnosis I gave was part of a ruse. Grace is perfectly healthy. We wanted to see how you would treat her if you believed she was gravely ill. A thick silence fell over the room. Kevin's face contorted between anger and embarrassment. Mrs. Alice began to stammer incoherently. Mrs. Alice, you tricked us? How dare you? Grace, voice shaking with emotion. Yes, I tricked you. But do you want to know what's worse? The cruelty you showed me when you thought I was dying. The property you tried to sell behind my back. The money you claimed as your own when it was actually mine. She gestured to Mr. Johnson, who opened a folder of documents. Mr. Johnson, here are the legal papers proving that all of these properties, including this house, were purchased by Grace, with her money, and are fully registered in her name. Kevin has no legal claim to them. One of the potential buyers stepped forward, visibly uncomfortable. Buyer 1. Then that means we were misled. We came here for a legitimate deal, only to find out the supposed seller doesn't even own the property. The police officer turned to Kevin. Police officer, we have reason to question you regarding attempted fraud. Attempting to sell property that isn't yours is a serious offense. Kevin panicked. I can explain. This is all a misunderstanding. My mother, she thought. Mrs. Alice, don't drag me into this. Kevin, this was your idea, not mine. Grace noted the immediate blame game they played, each trying to shift responsibility. The household staff stood in the hallway, watching the spectacle. Charity, the staff member, wore a look of relief. Grace, calmly, to the staff, everyone, please go about your duties. There's nothing to worry about. I'll sort this out. Charity nodded, leading the others away, though they remained within earshot, eager to see how everything would end. Dr. Melanie placed a comforting hand on Grace's shoulder. She knew how difficult it must be for Grace to stand up to her husband and mother-in-law so boldly. Grace took a deep breath, turning to Kevin again. Grace, you had the chance to support me, to love me, to stand by me in sickness and health. Instead, you chose to treat me like a burden, hoping I would die soon. Can you imagine how that made me feel? Kevin hung his head, words failing him. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Mrs. Alice's eyes narrowed in anger. Mrs. Alice, I did what any mother would do. I wanted the best for my son. If you're really the owner of all this, you should have told me from the start, instead of pretending Kevin was the provider. Grace, I never asked Kevin to lie. He chose that. I just never corrected him because I thought I was protecting his ego. In return, you repaid me by abusing me when you believed I was terminally ill. A thick tension gripped the room. The police officers stepped forward. Police officer, we'll need a full statement from you, Mrs. Alice, and from Kevin. The potential buyers also need to provide their statements to ensure there was no direct collusion. Mr. Johnson, we'll be in touch for the legal details. Mr. Johnson nodded, glancing at Grace with respect. By late afternoon, the two buyers had left, clearly upset but also relieved they hadn't given any money for the sale. The police took initial statements and decided to let Kevin and Mrs. Alice remain at the house for the moment, warning them not to attempt any more transactions. Dr. Melanie departed as well, satisfied that her part in the plan was complete. Inside the now quiet house, Grace stood in the living room, arms folded, staring at Kevin and Mrs. Alice. Grace, I want to hear it from you both. How could you do this to me? How could you plan to profit from my death? Kevin wiped sweat from his brow, his voice trembling. Kevin, I didn't want it to go this far. At first, I was just embarrassed that I lost my job and you were paying for everything. Then my mother came, and I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Mrs. Alice pointed an accusatory finger at Grace. Mrs. Alice, you spoiled him by taking over all the responsibilities. If you had let him struggle, maybe he would have become the man I raised him to be. A humorless laugh escaped Grace's lips. Grace, that's rich coming from you. Instead of encouraging your son to find honest work, you were content to believe he was earning money while I was actually the one footing all the bills. You never even paused to consider that I might be the breadwinner. Mrs. Alice's face hardened. She sank onto a couch, crossing her arms. Mrs. Alice, I don't have to explain myself to you. If my son says he's working, I believe him. Grace, even now, after everything has been exposed, you can't admit that you're both wrong? Mrs. Alice stayed silent, her eyes averted. Kevin dropped to his knees in front of Grace, his hands clasped together. Kevin, Grace, please forgive me. I promised to change. I was scared, I was weak, and I let my pride get in the way. I know you're the only one who truly cared about this marriage. Grace took a step back, not touching him. Grace, get up, Kevin. Apologies are words. I need actions. And frankly, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Tears welled in Kevin's eyes. Mrs. Alice looked away, as if disgusted by her son's display of remorse. But she said nothing. She had no defense against the facts laid out in front of her. For the next few days, the house remained tense. The police kept in contact, and Mr. Johnson assured Grace that as long as her paperwork remained in order, Kevin and Mrs. Alice couldn't sell any property. Grace withdrew large sums of money from the joint account she shared with Kevin, placing them into her personal account to safeguard her assets. Kevin, realizing the full gravity of the situation, grew quieter each day. Kevin, softly, Grace, I know I don't deserve your kindness, but please don't shut me out completely. I'm willing to go to counseling, to find a real job again, to rebuild your trust." Grace watched him, torn between the love that had once flourished and the hurt he had caused. She wasn't entirely sure she believed him yet, but she acknowledged that people can change if they truly want to. "Grace, I need time, and I need space." As for Mrs. Alice, she spent her days sulking around the house, occasionally snapping at the staff, but mostly staying out of Grace's way. One morning, Grace approached her in the guest room. "Grace, Ma, I think it's best you return home. You and Kevin can come back to visit when we've sorted through this mess." Mrs. Alice bristled at the suggestion. "Mrs. Alice, you think I don't see what you're doing? Trying to push me out? Fine, I'll leave. But don't expect me to come running when you need me." "Grace, I won't." Safe journey. That afternoon, Mrs. Alice packed her bags. Kevin drove her to the airport without much fanfare. When he returned, he found Grace seated in the living room, sipping tea. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Grace, I've decided to keep the house. I'll continue my business. The staff will remain. But I need you to move out for a while, Kevin. I need to learn how to breathe again without constantly feeling your betrayal." Kevin looked pained, but he nodded slowly. "Kevin, if that's what you want, I respect your decision." 3 days later, Kevin packed a small suitcase and left. For the first time in a long while, Grace had the house to herself. The staff carried on with their duties, and Grace felt a weight lift off her shoulders, even though a lingering sadness remained. A week later, Mr. Johnson stopped by to check in. "Mr. Johnson, Grace, how are you holding up?" Grace, smiling faintly, "I'm adjusting. It's strange, but I feel a kind of freedom now. No more secrets." "Mr. Johnson, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Not many people would have the courage to do what you did." Grace thanked him and walked him to the door. As he left, she stood on the threshold of her home, gazing out at the neat front yard, the light breeze rustling the leaves of a small garden she had planted. She had gone through pain and betrayal, but also rediscovered her own strength. She thought back to how she had pretended to be sick just to see who truly cared for her. Although the results had been heartbreaking, she was relieved the truth was finally out. No longer burdened by Kevin's pretense, she could move forward on her own terms. Whether she would ever reconcile with her husband was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she would never allow herself to be deceived, belittled, or used again. She walked back inside, feeling her shoulders relax with each step, confident she had reclaimed her dignity and her future. Thanks for watching. If you find this story interesting, do well to hit the subscription button and turn on the notification bell for our subsequent stories. Don't forget to like and share this video to others. See you in our next story.